Thank you for joining Wars of the Roses. As we continue with Part 10, Egypt Once the Glorious, from The Philosophy of Fire by R. Swinburne Clymer. Egypt Once the Glorious. The history of Egypt, which is but a continuation of Atlantis, may be divided into two periods, each subject to various changes and revolutions. What took place during the reign of Hyksos, or shepherd kings, and the period of the Israelites' captivity, or the immediate generations preceding the 18th dynasty, or that of Ramses the Great, who lived about 14 centuries before the birth of Jesus of Nazareth. He who became the master initiate may be considered the beginning of true art in Egypt, of which little is known beyond what is said in the book of Genesis and the account in Exodus. Pliny tells us that according to their own accounts, the Egyptians were masters of painting full 6,000 years before it passed from them to the Greeks. The art of Egypt was purely symbolic in its principles and historic in its practice, was the tool of a hierarchy, its artists the slaves of superstitions. Egyptian hieroglyphics appear to be simply records, social, religious, and political. Egyptian painting was accordingly more of a symbolical writing than a liberal art. The architectural remains that have attracted so much notice in Egypt during the last century are scattered along both sides of the Nile for a distance of nearly 1,000 miles. These consist of temples, pyramids, obelisks, and monoliths, or large stone pillars. Very diverse opinions have been expressed as to the periods when these various monuments were built, but it is generally agreed that their construction must have embraced the long period of at least 2,000 years. Some, situated near the mouth of the Nile, having been constructed after the commencement of the Christian era, while others, high up in the country toward Abyssinia, are believed to have been built nearly 2,000 years before the Christian era. Whatever may be the difference of opinion on these conjectural points, it is agreed by those who know that Egypt displayed the most mighty examples of structures built ages before Greece and Rome were numbered among the nations of the world. And all other ancient structures may be best viewed by comparing them with those of Egypt. At a short distance from Dendera, now called Upper Egypt, is the most extraordinary group of architectural ruins presented in any part of the world, known as the temples of the ancient city of Thebes. Thebes in its prime occupied a large area on both sides of the Nile. This city was the center of a great commercial nation of Upper Egypt, ages before Memphis was the capital of the second nation in Lower Egypt. And however grand the architectural monuments of the latter may have been, those of the former surpassed them. What sublime conceptions can be derived from such magnificent specimens of man's creation in architecture, not only in magnitude but in form, proportion, and construction. The portrayal by pencil or brush can convey but a faint idea of the perfected city. As the city stands today, it is like a city of giants who, after a long conflict, have been all destroyed, leaving the ruins of their various temples as the only proofs of their existence. The temple of Luxor, it was in this temple that the Grand Lodge of Initiates always met, stands on a raised platform of brickwork covering more than 2,000 feet in length and 1,000 in breadth. It is the one that interests the members of all ancient orders, especially so all the members of those orders that worshipped at the shrine of the secret fire more than perhaps any other, and stands on the eastern bank of the Nile. It is in a very ruined state, but records say the stupendous scale of its proportions almost takes away the sense of its incompleteness. Up to about a quarter of a century ago, the greater part of its columns in the interior and part of the inner sanctuary remained, but the outer walls had been removed after falling for use elsewhere. This temple, which figures more or less in the history of the different occult or mystical orders as all originally came from one source, and that Atlantis, from the Atlantean fire worshippers, was founded by Amenhotep III, who constructed the southern part, including the heavy colonnade overlooking the river. But the world is indebted to Ramses II for the remaining portion, but destruction unfortunately conceals this fact. The chief entrance to the temple looked to the east, while the holy chamber at the upper end of the plan approached the Nile. As mighty as the temple of Luxor was, it was exceeded in magnitude and grandeur by that of Karnak. The distance between these two great structures was 1.5 miles. Along this avenue was a double row of sphinxes placed 12 feet apart and the width of the avenue was 60 feet. When in perfect state, this avenue presented the most extraordinary entrance that the world has ever seen. If we had the power to picture from the field of imagination the grand processions of neophytes constantly passing through and taking part in the ceremonies of initiation, we would be powerless to produce the grandeur of the surroundings and the imposing sight of color and magnificent trappings of those who took part. Neither can we produce the music that kept the vast number of people in steady marching order. Crude it may have been to the cultivated ear of the 20th century, but could not the palpitating strain sung by massed voices on the lapse of time, whose history touches the profoundest aspirations of the human heart, like the trend of a mighty river, become the grand currents of universal law, imparting the desire to that shadowy past as it steps forth from the pages of a history dim with age? Egypt must have been, when these temples were built, a marital nation, for records of its warlike deeds are perpetuated in deeply engraved tablets, which even now excite the admiration of the best judges of archaeological remains. It was also a highly civilized nation, and of a nature that could bear the expenditure which always attends the culture of the arts. Yet, strange as it may seem, we do not know with any certainty either its history or its chronology. It surpassed in its astonishing architecture all other nations that have existed upon the earth, and yet the greater power and beauty which belongs to intellect was scarcely to be traced. In those times, the armies of Egypt went forth to conquer and subdue the known physical world, but the knowledge and potency that found rest and culture at Atlantis, Luxor, and Elephantis so permeated and controlled all nations that records of experience becoming knowledge have been preserved even to the present day. So deeply were they impressed upon the unseen that they, returning upon their cycles of development, have been considered by our age as original inventions and discoveries. The earth-born forget nothing so easily as wisdom or its possession. The thrice-wise said, "There is nothing new under the sun." But in our day, when, instead of the best men and soldiers of a nationality coming forth from fair and beautiful cities, arrayed for the conquest, the armies of Egypt and Chaldea are swarming from out the unseen. They are overrunning all countries where there is spiritual light and life enough to give them assurance of sufficient advancement to warrant their incarnation. They are hampered by the customs and restrictions of the mortal laws, and their own strict regard for all law. If there was one thing more than another that an Egyptian respected and venerated, it was the law under which he lived, the symbols of authority upon the throne, and the sign of spiritual presence in the temple. Urged on, however, by the impulses of the higher self, they are striving in this day and generation to the best of their unfolding, for their own progress, and for the consolidation of the brotherhood seen and unseen. They have perceived it was absolutely necessary to rise above the mental impediments of their environments, and the unseen brotherhood, who are not yet ready to support their colleagues in manifestation, stand behind them rank upon rank. The impulse and the vibration coming from these supporting columns thrill along the soul formations of the past. The vibrations bring recurring memories which whisper of the one, the great God Om, and of his truth. Everywhere, on all lines, these ancient ones are seeking to verify in the outer what Kabbalistic symbols and signs are, the hidden truths of being which from time to time have been whispered out of the intelligence and knowledge locked up in the archives of the Astral Light Library. Oh, you neophytes, listen to the voice that comes out of the silence and believe it for the truth's sake. You have not yet concentrated enough. The watchfires on the mountaintop do not yet break down the darkness. So separated, they contain within themselves weakness. If they can be brought together, knowing each other's feeling and intensity of purpose, which demands sacrifice of the modes of expression, of the spirit of the utterances, then it will be as if 1,000 campfires were massed in one, and it became the beacon light of the world. The field is ripe for the harvest, and the stalks are falling on the ground from the weight of the grain. Will you save it? Will you accomplish for yourself that which shall make the path of those who follow you easier? We have in our archives the mysteries. Are you ready to receive them? As Egypt in the olden time, when her star of glory was highest, was mistress of the world, so now may you be full of potency and power, masters of the good, ready to lean on and place on record the conditions needed to bring about the opening again of that which was lost to those who are now crying, hungering, and thirsting for the truth. The true Egyptian knows whatever was lost had not disappeared in the sense of being destroyed, but is simply veiled. The veil of Isis is thrown over it, and no arm since that time has been strong enough, potent enough, willful enough to tear it aside. The land of Egypt lies desolate. The stranger treadeth within her gates. Desolation broods over her temples, her palaces, her cities, and the archives and treasures of incomparable knowledge. How long, O sons of Egypt, brothers of the one family, sons of the one, will you refuse or think it of little moment to take concerted and united action, that there may come to light once again all the beauty and grandeur, all the potency and knowledge that have been waiting thousands of years for the time and times when you should once more be upon earth? We, in our secret archives, hold the documents and the mysteries of the temples. Are you ready to receive these mysteries? Shall the cycles move on, and you, having accomplished your pilgrimage, go hence into the unseen, leaving all unrevealed that might have come to you, and thus all the world to await the unfolding of another cycle? You are face to face with all that ever has been. The means are in your hands. The world is before you. The potencies of the most ancient knowledge, with the direct influence of the searchlight pouring upon it, is your birthright. Take and use it. Commence at once and persist until you have reached that point where you can say to the physical, "Stay, as I shall have need of thee." Egypt has left us no memory of a Homer, a Pericles, or a Xenophon. A single Hebrew writer, Moses, gives us a clearer insight, a more exact and truthful view of the actual state of that land than we can gain from any of its monuments or written remains, or from Herodotus or any other Greek. The principal idea presented to us in the rapid sketches of the books of Moses is that of power. Absolute power. I am Pharaoh, and with me none shall lift up his hands or foot in all the land of Egypt. All travelers on their journeys stand amazed at the prodigies which surround them on every side. But the main fact is the same. Power must have created all these things, for in the 20th century of the Christian era, to reproduce the works which can be found even in the present at Luxor and Karnak would be utterly and entirely impossible. So long as we are ununited and self-seeking, we are creating both in the visible and in the invisible realms a feeling of opposition that grows stronger and stronger as we increase our momentum of individuality. To this condition, by the very essence of its existence, are necessarily drawn all other discordant forces. Singly, they hold perhaps but little energy, but like grains of sand, in united action, they can weigh tons. It is strange how long it has taken man to learn this lesson of unity from the physical world. But as he will not let go of his physical and look towards the spiritual side of himself, he must receive the chastisements that are the inevitable consequence. When he does come to the time and place where from the spiritual side of himself he can contemplate, he perceives a new view from his contemplation. This does not help self as a center of action or a starting point of force, but it holds out. It makes unity of harmonious action the mainspring of all life. The words of the wise to man consequently ring and echo with injunctions to him of important import. Obey the law, the word of the supreme will. Do the will of the Father. These reiterated words of advice are forever reverberating through the arches of space. The more we declare that we will not obey, but will follow our own short-sighted inclinations in the direction of our desire and pleasure, the more we shall be sure to become tangled in savagery. Here we attempt to stay the immutable law, bringing upon ourselves the condign punishment or pain by which only our animality can be trained. It is we and not God who is benefited by our conformity to law, the natural order of things. Thus we as animals have been and are gradually forced to perceive that the potency of united action is the only way by which we may hope to succeed. To be eminently successful is the only result if we are truly on the basis of universal law, the only right method of action. Under the impress of the Spirit, we become desirous of being of some service to all our fellows, even if it is no more than to eat at the second table. When we have come to this point, it is no longer possible for us to hold enmity against our fellows, even in behalf of our most carefully cultivated feuds. What others may do often causes annoyance, but never that unrelenting setness we know as hatred, which, like the hardening of a plaster cast, binds into an immovable and inflexible limitation, influencing even the condition of the soul in both the hater and the one hated. The reader may think I am transgressing in giving the cause of certain results. I am not. In writing the history of a people or an order, it is as important to give the reason for its downfall as it is to state what was taught, so warning other nations and orders not to fall into like error. Hence is it necessary to point out the way of deliverance. It is a mistake to look at an Egyptian temple in the light of a church or even of a Greek temple. Here no public worship was performed. The faithful did not congregate for public prayer. Indeed, no one was admitted inside the sanctuary except the priest and the initiates of the order. In some, not even the king, unless he was an initiate, was allowed at all times. The temple was a royal proscenium, that is, a token of piety from the king who erected it, whereby to win the favor of the gods. The Egyptian temples were always dedicated to three gods, a triad, and it is actually from this was copied the Christian Trinity. The first was the male principle, second the female principle, third the offspring of the two, creator, creating, and creation. In the Christian Trinity it is the Father, creator, the Virgin Mary, creatrix, and Jesus, the Son, or offspring. Thus the three deities are blended into one, expressing neither beginning nor end. We thus prove that the ancient mysteries were taught and celebrated, first in Atlantis, second in Egypt, third in Elephantis. In all of the temples of these places, the fire philosophy was taught as it has been throughout all the secret orders since the time of ancient Atlantis. Of the fire philosophy of Atlantis, Egypt, and India, not much can be said in a history, as they are secret and not to be divulged to the profane. Only a small part of these instructions may be quoted from the secret manuscript, proving that such was the philosophy of the ancient masters. Each spark contains the flame consciousness belonging to every soul, which evolves finally into manifestation. In it, and under all, rests the eternal essence, the never-dying flame, which, once lighted, soul awakened, bridges the eternal past with the eternal future. It is the life existent, the soul of fire. It is the only true way, the infinite God. The mighty spirit of the flame has no destructive essence within itself, but it holds all power by divine commission to create the light that glorifies and uplifts everything that it shines upon. The central fire, God, radiates to the circumference and there touches the periphery of all its existence. Again, returning to the center, it holds ensouled within its vibrations other souls to be illuminated and to become self-radiating from the same great fire. The fire of all the gods is kindled from and concentrated in one great God. Since the beginning of days, sacrifices have been laid upon the altar of fire. In all ancient writings are we told of the common fire, the sacred fire, and of sacrificial fire. What means the fire upon the altar? What means the mysterious light, the incense soaring in misty waves as a soul expands in exaltation, the air heavy with its exhaled perfume, the solemn multitude of lamps which with their richly wrought golden arbor gleams about shrine and tabernacle? What but that fire, ascending toward heaven in its pristine blueness and triangular shape, is the profoundest symbol of the supreme life-giving power? Watching the leaping flame, the triangle plainly manifests itself. The base below, the apex pointing up, is from the beginning, put forth as symbolic of the unseen, the unknown God. There is nothing in all the world that holds so completely within itself all the attributes of the supreme intelligence. The point reaching upward is always the node of superior energy, the creator of life and sensation. Hence the apex of the fiery triangle must be the absolute, for the real potency of fire appears at the moment of contact. The spirit of fire we cognize as life. Wherever God is, there fire as the Holy Ghost will also be. Wherever fire is, there is life. Wherever fire rests, their manifestation will be. If fire is life, then it must hold within itself the divine intelligence, hence the flame. The essential essence of the flame is life, God. If fire is God and God is love, the essential fire must be love, and thus we can only find the fire through love and God through the fire. The manifested fire can sweep away all man's possession and destroy his body, but the essence dropping into the secret place of the Most High, the maelstrom or vehicle which holds within itself the unseen charm of all existence, lights the flame that makes man immortal. Where man worships, the lights burning upon the altar are symbolical of the divine energy of generation and regeneration. These flaming lights encircle the most holy point of the ancient mosques. They glow in ambient beauty about the shrine of saints and the churches of the eternal cities. They burn constantly in mystic attestation before the tombs of the Redeemers. Always and everywhere, they are and always have been a silent witness and sign to the initiate of the origin and significance of the sun worshippers. Man, seeing fire struck out from the cold, unyielding flint, comes to believe that the coldest, hardest stone must have a heart of fire. All nature is built upon the divine fire. The flagstone of matter shuts it down, waiting for the great central sun to drop a ray of fiery essence into the bosom of Mother Earth. It thereby creates sufficient impulse to cause it to stream forth, unwind its starry limbs, and step into manifestation. This fire descending upon the altar of Mother Earth holds concealed as its ultimate the secret of life. The lily bulb contains the same forceful fire. It possesses the creative energy to rise from the lowest to the highest. The lotus is the whole lesson and law of transmutation. By its own function and growth, the law of the creative energy acts. The gross becomes the supernal. The supreme atom of the lily and all else that is has kindled, at the base of this altar of the waters, the eternal essence of life, which is fire. When it reaches the surface in manifesting beauty, there burns within its bosom, white chalice of the gods, the heart of fire, the tongue of flame of the Holy Spirit. Having descended into matter for the purpose of taking hold of the material, it converts the opaque into the brilliant purity of the highest transmutation. The Holy Spirit does not really descend, but only places itself in touch with that which is lower. What a beautiful illustration of the true initiation we have here. The secret is so plainly unveiled that all who have eyes may see. The fire springing out of the etheric and auric vibrations is the highest esoteric fire, born of the spontaneous action of the positive and the negative forces. We gaze with awe upon its multiform shapes, its trails of sparks, its flame wreaths, scintillating wavering arches and vortices starting up out of the matrix of apparent solidity, reducing its source to its own ultimate invisibility. Flame is significant of rebirth and resurrection, of the spiritual born out of the material. It is symbol and substance at once of the immortality of the ego. Hence the angel of fire hath dominion. Above all is the glowing supernatural flower of love, concealed in the inanimate womb of matter. The great love of the physical world, whose warmth and ardor destroys the material and perceptible form, is symbolized by the enwrapping flame. Freed from its prison of limitation and thus formless, it gives rebirth to the spirit in both the seen and the unseen worlds. The fire god, the beautiful, the resplendent, conceived in the land of silence, born out of the womb of mystery. Thou art the shadow of the shadowless. Thou art the causeless cause, the existent God. We worship not the fire, but that which is represented by the fire, love. There is no power but love, strong enough to hold through all the complex problems of earth life. It is love that meets us as we cross the threshold of the narrow gate. It is love that looks into our eyes as we close them in the last earthly sleep. It is love that greets us when the gates of paradise swing inward for our reception after our long or brief pilgrimage in the mortal realm. Love is that which abides and is as eternal as God. This is the love that dies not. They who love truly can easily and cheerfully put aside self for the beloved. Whoever returns to earth, searching for whom he seeks, can only find and rejoin them by entering into this realm of omnipotence. Love is a guide which will never fail. Love will restore the loved ones to each other should they ever be lost. Love, the law, in its fulfilling, must hold for itself both an inflowing and an outflowing current. The ebb and flow of the lifeblood is symbolical of the give and take of love in activity. He who loves lives in the highest realm of the all-life. He who loves counts all things but loss, if he may but win and hold the true love and real affection of the one loved. The true lover takes labor and toil by the hand as benefactors and boon companions, leads them into verdant pastures, giving fresh hope to the tired and overtaxed heart. Love tunes the harp of life to the perfect vibration of the at-one-ment. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe and comment, and if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Roses. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.